are kind of and kind of not doing currently. But it's essentially just to make sure that we have the resources that we need to get the projects done. That's something that's kind of an issue on a higher level at this point. So we kind of try to do our best with what we have and plan as far ahead as we possibly can. Completed project analysis and insight gathering, that's something planned for the future, that once we do have this team, we will do postmortems on large projects. If there were any issues, we want to identify them, we want to talk about them, we want to come up with solutions, and we want to implement those solutions so that we don't have those same problems over and over again. Scheduling, we're already doing. Budget management and financial oversight, that's something that the project managers will eventually just work hand in hand with account management on, to make sure that we're not going over budget, to understand what the budget is before we start scheduling, so that we're scheduling the appropriate amount of hours, the right people, that we're kind of making sure that we're not pulling 20 people into a meeting when we only have a budget of a couple $1,000s. So along with account management, project managers will kind of be overseeing that as well. Quality assurance, I talked about, but that's ensuring that the processes are being upheld and that we're problem solving. Problem resolution, kind of talked about that already. Contingency planning is, here's our critical path. Here's what the plan is from day one. If we hit a snag here, if we hit a snag here, what's the backup plan? Centralized communications management, that's a big one, I think. What that does is it provides now a neutral department for everybody else to come to with questions or issues. And now project management will be accountable for addressing those with the appropriate people and keeping things in motion. If an issue arises, we're doing something about it. Or if creative and account service and media need to understand what the scope of the project is, there's one person they can come to who should be able to download them on that information. Meeting scheduling and admin, that's whatever. This, you guys can read through this when you get a chance. It just essentially says everything I just said. It goes into detail a little bit more about what the main duties will be for this department. This kind of is the same thing. I went over most of this. We manage the production of the shared assets, which we're, again, trying to already do because we have limited creative staff. It's even more important that there is now this centralized department kind of looking out for that team where, of course, every account executive is looking out for themselves and their own clients. Of course they are. That's what their job is. But without some central department, it's just going to be a free-for-all, and all the account executives are going to be fighting against each other, and there's no resolution there. So,
are we ever going to have enough creative people?
I hope so. I can't answer that question, but yes, we all hope so. This last one, certain responsibilities are lifted off of account management. That, again, will be kind of the deadline management. Once we have this team put in place, the project manager, first and foremost, the account executive is still responsible for their deadlines, but the project manager will really be the one on top of those deadlines, following up with everybody and making sure that deadlines aren't being missed across the board. So that's something that will be nice to be lifted off of account service so they can focus more on building their client relationships. And some of the admin things, scheduling the kickoff meetings, making sure the right people are involved. That'll all end up falling on the project manager primarily.
Eventually, right?
Eventually, yes.
Sure.
And
Okay.
once that team is set up and we're ready to go, you will all know, believe me.
Okay.
Process efficiencies. This is, again, something we're already trying to do, but it's a central source of information and direction on project requirements, budget, scope, timelines, and resource needs, management of our agency resources, and the processes and procedures that everyone should be using. There should be reduced do-over rates due to awareness from the beginning of what the deliverables are and what's required, and the adherence to agency processes and procedures. A workload equilibrium, which allows for better distribution of resources across multiple projects. Again, there are some staffing issues that we all know need to be resolved, but until then, we do our best to kind of shift things around. Quality control, greater consistency across all projects, accounts, and departments. And that will lead to an increased level of client satisfaction and confidence. Once this all gets put into place and we really start working together better as, an agency team instead of one department against the other, this will facilitate communication, this will facilitate redos, this will facilitate hopefully avoiding a lot of the rework and extra work that we create for ourselves. And ultimately, it should help us meet deadlines, meet client expectations, and everybody across the board should be happier. This slide just talks about, again, what I had said earlier, that now we have a steward for the agency. Account service is the steward of the client, as they should be. There was never a central steward of the agency in our internal processes until now. And once this project management team is really built out, that'll be one of our primary responsibilities, is to maintain the integrity of the agency and make sure that we're not killing ourselves unnecessarily and, identifying problem areas. Providing a neutral party for all departments to use as a sounding board, another thing I already touched on, but that's another huge one. When you're all fighting for your own agenda, which
Does
of course
that
you
include
are.
account management or just everybody else?
What? Patty, stop it.
I'm just trying to understand.
Of course it does. It includes
Okay.
everybody.
Okay.
So now there's this neutral party because I don't care what agency you go to,
Yeah.
creative and account service are always going to be
I
fighting
know.
each other. It's just the nature of your responsibilities and your jobs. Now at least there's a middleman. There's somebody to kind of play intermediary who understands both sides, who understands the overall end goal, and can kind of try to work through those issues and prioritize on a global scale instead of, on a project basis. So that's the plan for that. I already talked about that. Staff development and training, which is another thing that, again, once we have this team really built, will become a priority. Doing it just a little bit with a few star U's here and there on different things. But eventually, this team will be the team to do all of the training on any new processes or procedures. We'll be holding task force meetings or kind of, I hate the term town halls, but that's essentially what they'll be,
Right.
so that any voices can be heard, issues can be brought up and dealt with, and we're not all just stewing with all of our issues sitting at our desk being angry. So hopefully this will facilitate some problem solving and some actual solutions as we run into things in the future. And then training like this Star U will hopefully continue to happen, and we'll build out on some of the topics that we provide for that. Okay. So that's basically an overview on where we're taking this team, where we want it to go. Do you guys have any questions or concerns or things that maybe I didn't say that you thought should be a project management responsibility? Anybody? Anybody on the phone?
I'm not allowed to talk. So.
Of course you are.
Are you guys going to use like any software, like
Oh, as far as what?
project or anything?
We use WebVantage.
Okay, so that
Is
would
our
be the
project management tool.
platform as well?
Yes, it's what we inherited because it's our accounting software and we kind of run everything on that. It generally does what we need it to do. As everybody knows, we have, it's not perfect. But yeah, that's what we use as our
And
project
that's not
management
changing, in other
tool.
words. There's no.
It's not as far as I know. No, not anytime soon anyway. So, okay. Next, I just want to go through some of the larger topics that maybe I felt just needed, a reminder for everybody.
Are we going to go through if hot job, because I don't know how.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep,
All right.
that's on here. Yes. And some of these things are geared for account service, and some are creative. So bear with me if
Gotcha.
it doesn't directly apply to you
Okay.
guys. This slide is mostly for account service. Just a reminder to open separate jobs or components for each deliverable. If you have a TV and a radio spot, don't open one job for broadcast. You would want separate jobs for that. If you have, I hate seeing jobs for collateral. I can't stand that. What if you're doing a poster and a table tent and whatever else?
Name it.
They should all be separate components or separate jobs. And it may sound like extra work, and maybe it is a little bit, but truthfully, so often we have to go back to those jobs to either pull a spec or to see what we did, or to pull an estimate or a PO or whatever it may be. And when they're specifically named, it's a lot easier to, one, find it, and two, to figure out which information applies to that piece. If it's all jumbled up into one big job, it's almost impossible to decipher and find the
So-
information you're looking for.
So I'm assuming we should do individual jobs for each piece
It's up to you. You can.
rather than components.
It's up to you. Some
Okay.
some teams work one way, some teams work another way. It doesn't
Okay.
matter, just as long as it's organized
Right.
separately.
Okay.
Like the Delaware Lottery, they open one overarching job for the campaign, and then they open separate components for each deliverable underneath of it. It's up to you. That actually brings me to probably what is my next slide, which is opening campaigns. This is why it doesn't matter how you do it, because you should have opened a campaign to link either those components or those jobs to. So there's still a way to pull a billing report by campaign, whether you did it as separate job numbers or separate components. And remember, only one estimate can be created under each component, which is another reason we need everything open separately.
Well, how about a revised estimate? Can you open that under a job if a estimate's been open and you have to revise it?
If it
Even
hasn't
after a
already
client
been
signed it?
billed, if it hasn't already been billed,
Okay,
then we can go in and revise it and just get the client to re-sign it.
okay,
If it's been billed already or a portion of it has been billed, then no, then we need to open a new one.
all right.
When you're naming your jobs, be as specific as possible. Don't just open up, 2013 brochure. That doesn't help anybody when we're going back to try to find the job to reference it for something. This example says Spa Acoustic Trifold Product Brochure, June 2013. We do so many projects that are the same because we just keep
Right.
revising them, or we do one annually, or whatever it may be. So you need to be specific in your job name so that we can easily, go back and reference it. Spell check. This is for everybody across the board on everything. This specifically is talking about work orders, your job names and work orders. Even if your work order instructions, are just going around internally, as an account executive, you really should be proofreading your work orders and making sure that there aren't typos in your work orders. You want them to be clear. You want them to be perfect. But more often it applies to the job name, because that actually shows up on estimates. It shows up on POs. It shows up on a lot of things that go out, externally of the agency that our vendors and our clients are seeing. So that's even more important. This is just a little one. Remember to change your alert subject lines. I know RAs are pretty good at this. I don't really have many problems with this. Just make sure that if you're asking for an estimate, you put estimate in the beginning of your subject line so that your production manager knows this is for you. Make sure you look at it right away. That's pretty much it. You guys are pretty good at that. This is just a reminder on the very few instances when AEs can send work orders directly to the creative team and just copy project management.
See, I think that's confusing.
What?
When do I send it directly to creative and copy you? I thought
That's
I did
what this is.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, corrections.
These are the only times you should be doing that. If it's something that was already in the original work order and it just got missed,
Okay.
you don't need to send that through us again. When I say requesting, the second one, requesting fixes to small spelling typos or grammatical
Right.
punctuation errors, that literally means there's a missing period, 2 letters in a word are flip-flopped, and they need, if you're changing a word and you're making a copy change, that is not what this means. This is only for blatant typos and missing punctuation.
Okay.
If your work order is only requesting an estimate, you're not requesting any creative deliverables or a media plan, that can go directly to the production manager or the media department with a copy to project management. And then approval and release requests. As long as all of the specs and the spec sheet, the vendor information, upload information is in your work order, we don't like to hold up that approval release process. You can send that right to the creative team and just copy us so we know that it's going out. But generally, the instructions are it's approved, release it, here's the vendor. These are all the ones that cannot go right to creative, which is everything that I didn't already say. So I'm just going to skip through that one, but this is for you to refer back to in case you need it. Actually, I will talk about this last one. Any changes to the project timeline or due date? That's a big one. We need to know about that. I just saw this happen the other day, that the actual scope of the job changed, and we had no idea. And the creative team came back to us and said, we can't do this in, whatever it was, 2 or 3 days. This is a whole new design. Well, according to the work order, it wasn't. But there had been a discussion, and the scope of work changed, and nobody ever let project management know. So why would we ever think to extend that deadline? So that's a big one. If the scope changes, project timeline or due date changes, we need to know about that. This I just talked about, using campaigns. Just make sure that you open a campaign and then every job number or component number that applies to that campaign is linked to it in WebVantage. I included the instructions here on this next slide, so if you don't have them from the email I sent out a few months ago, they're here. If you start doing this and you have questions, just reach out to me. I can help you do that. But just make sure you're opening campaigns. It helps accounting and it helps pulling billing reports based on campaigns. Okay, Betty, here's your slide. Hot job requests.
Okay.
So, of course, in some very, very rare cases, there may be an unusually quick client turnaround request that we have to meet, that we can't, push back on. When this happens, the very, very first thing you should do is still submit your work order. Nobody can really do anything without that. We need to know what the scope is, the deliverables, and make sure that we have all of the information to get started. As soon as you do that, pick up the phone, call project management, let us know that it's coming, why it needs to be completed by whatever crazy due date you're asking
Yeah,
for.
but isn't that in the work order? Shouldn't you explain all that in the work order?
The why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it depends. Either way, you should call
Okay.
because
No,
we want
I
to make
do
sure
call.
we look at that right away
Right,
and that
right.
we talk to
Right.
whoever we need to talk to, because we're going to have to still go to the creative team and say, hey guys,
Correct.
unfortunately this needs
Right.
to be done. What can we move around?
Gotcha.
And we kind of, on the back end need to be moving things around to accommodate this new hot job request. Once we've spoken to creative and we've come up with a game plan on how we're going to get this done, project management will get back to the account team, let you know what the plan is, and then, and only then, you can go back to your client and say, we're going above and beyond for you, we're making this work, we're going to have it done, sell it, because we're doing, we're...
Sure.
Well, so more importantly, so they know that it's an unusual circumstance.
Exactly.
The expectation for everything.
Right.
Exactly right. I talk to my team. We're moving things around. We're going to work extra hours or whatever. Not really, creative team. But make them feel good about the fact that we are going to bat for them. And yes, we can get this done, and don't worry, But make sure that project management has given you the green light before you go ahead and do that. Which leads me into my next slide, managing client expectations. The turnaround timeline guide that I did send around, and again we'll send to the creative team, is a great place to start. If your client says, we're going to have this big web project or whatever it may be, how quickly do you think you can turn that around for us? Well, you can take a look at your turnaround time guideline and say, well, typically something like that would take 5 to 6 weeks, but we need this and this and this information first. So let me check with my project management team and I can get back to you. We are in a market now where everybody expects immediate satisfaction and gratification. Everybody wants everything right away. Ideally, we just simply cannot do that. And I think everybody knows that. Your clients are business people too. So you need to know how to have that conversation with them to say, is there a true hard deadline? If there is, we're not going to miss a client deadline, but we're going to have to figure out on the back end how we're going to work around that. If there isn't a true hard deadline, then we need to be able to go back to our clients and say, okay, look, if you want the best quality product that the Star Group can provide you, we need this amount of time, and here's our process. We're going to sit down with our creative team, our production team, our media team, digital, whoever. We're going to brainstorm. We're going to concept. We're going to do this and this and blah, 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 blah. All of that takes time, but it's going to ensure that you guys are getting the most quality product. If you want it fast, it's not going to be the quality, the star quality, that we want to give you, that you're paying for. You know what I mean?
It used to be that old, what was it? Was cost, time,
Yeah,
quality.
pick two. Yeah,
pick two.
exactly. Right, and that's kind of what this first bullet point on my next slide says. Most of your clients, again, they're business people too. They get it. If you talk to them like a business person and say, look, you want quality or speed? There's only so much we can do in a day. They have their own responsibilities. They get that. They're going to try to push you as hard as they can. Of course they are. But if you go back to them and you have this conversation, you try to manage their expectations, if you've given them the choice between quality and speed, guess which one they're going to pick? They want it done right. I've seen it happen a million times where we rush something through because, there's this crazy deadline that we have to meet. We get it back to the client, it's not right. All of a sudden, we have 2 more weeks to do it again, when we could have just done it right the first time. So just think about that, when your client comes to you with these kind of crazy requests. Keep that in the back of your head. Keep putting those bugs in their ear, about, do you want it done right or do you want it done fast? This last one kind of says that. Encourage open conversation with your clients. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone early in the process. Not the day it's due and when we have to say, oh shit, we need more time. Sorry, can you give us another week? I know we promised it to you today. That's not the time to have that conversation. You need to know up front that what they're asking for is either not doable, or it may be, but you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. You want to do the opposite. So you may want to say, look, to get you a quality product, I'd really like to have an extra week. Is that okay? If they give it to us and we deliver it early, that's like an extra bonus. So it's a conversation. We're not trying to tell our clients no. We're not trying to piss them off. It's a professional conversation that we're having in the beginning so that we're setting ourselves up for success and not failure. So pick up the phone early on. Have that conversation. We need the additional time to develop a thoughtful strategy and exceptional creative. 9 times out of 10, they will understand because they're paying us to come up with a stellar concept and a stellar brand strategy, whatever the project may be. But they're paying us money for that service, not to just shit out a piece of whatever. So think about that when your client comes to you in the beginning. Any questions on that? Anybody? Comments? Okay. These are just kind of some logistical, tactical kind of things that I wanted to throw in here so that you can always have somewhere to refer back for this information, because I have had a lot of questions on these things. This is why I added them. Finding old jobs in WebVantage. I think a lot of people know where to go for this, but when you go to the Find Job Jacket module at the top navigation, you'll get this list in the screenshot here. I actually started searching on Component. Because we do use components a lot of times just searching the job name isn't going to get you exactly where you want to go. You can search the job name if you have any idea of what the job was called, and it'll bring up the whole list of components. But if you only know it was a brochure and you have no idea what the other part of the name might have been, you can go into Component, just type in BRO, and it'll bring up every component that was opened with those letters in it. And then you can search from there. And this is what that will look like if you just search brochure or whatever. It'll bring up every job in this. If you filled in nothing else, not even a client, that's what it'll look like. It'll bring up every client that had those letters in the name. If it's a job that's been closed in the system, or is a really old job that you think has probably been closed, just make sure you click that Show Closed Archive Jobs button down there at the bottom, or it won't show up. Yep, blah, blah, blah. And these are some very specific instructions that if you needed to do this and follow through, you can look through those slides. I'm not going to go through it right now.
Are you sending us this presentation or
It'll be on
the server?
it'll be on the server, but I
Okay.
can send you a PDF too.
Okay.
This is a good one for everyone. Checking the status of a job. A lot of times, people will say, I don't even know if I sent that job to project management, or I don't know if project management ever sent it out to creative, or I don't know if creative ever sent the work back to me. I can't find it in my email, but it was due whenever. That is the best part about WebVantage. It tracks all of that. So you don't have to worry about filing everything in your email anymore. You don't have to comb through all of your millions of emails to try to find out, what last happened on this job. All you have to do is go into the alerts module of the job in WebVantage. So pull up the job in WebVantage, click on this nice little double bubble icon for the alerts. That'll bring up a list of all of the alerts sent regarding that specific job, with the most recent alert at the top. This is what that alerts window will look like. In the by field, it'll tell you the last person to reply to that alert. So if John Mathers replied to the original work order with the PDF of the creative, his name will show up next to that, or in that by field. Then you'll be able to actually click on that alert link, see the actual comments, and download the PDF that was attached to that alert. So it all lives there forever and ever and ever. You don't have to ask for John to resend it. You don't have to look through all of your emails. It's all still there. And it's got the entire, essentially it's like an inbox. It's just all nice and organized per job in WebVantage. And it'll always be there. This one is for account service. I know that we took away the templates that we had set up for the WebVantage desktop widgets because they were clogging up the system and making it run really slow. So you may or may not have widgets that automatically pop up when you open WebVantage. We're trying to keep that to a minimum and not have people have a lot of widgets on their desktop, but this is one that I recommend for account service. What it does is you can filter by all of your projects, anything you're the AE on, or you can filter by client if maybe somebody else opened some of the jobs. And it'll give you just a running list of those jobs. And from this list, you can actually go directly into the alerts, the document manager. All of those little buttons that are at the top of the job jacket are all right here. So it saves you a couple steps of having to click through to the job jacket, then click through to the module. Another great thing that this does is those little colored $ bubbles are your quote versus actuals. You'll notice that some of them are yellow, some of them are green, and some of them are red. They're set to an 80% threshold. So if there's an estimate in the system for that job, and we've already hit 80% of that estimate, that bubble's going to turn red. You're going to know from one glance that we're in danger of going over that budget. So I encourage all of project management to have Project Viewpoint up as a widget, and I can show you how to set that up on your desktop. But I think the most valuable tool is the QVA, because we need to do a better job of keeping on top of our budgets. We are often not profitable because we allow our clients to just continue and make revision after revision and revision because we're not paying attention to where we're at against our budget. This just tells you what you can do in Project Viewpoint and how to get there, and how to filter it. The binoculars at the top. Ow, there's something in my eye. The little binocular icon is how you filter. So if you want to filter on yourself or filter on a client, that's where you would go to filter it. This is just a little bit more in detail on the quote versus actual. I think most of you have probably at least been in it and perused around. I don't know how often we use it, but I think you guys are pretty familiar with what it looks like. If you were in the Project Viewpoint and you did click on that little $ button, this is what it would bring you to, the quote versus actual summary. And it gives you a great overview of what the estimated budget was, where our actuals are coming in, what hours we've charged to that job. And it gives you a great overview of how close we are to going over and where we're at. If you go into detail, it'll show you exactly which employees charged what time, so you can see where we went over and then maybe figure out why, if it was justified or not, that sort of thing. Okay, this one is for the creative team, and I think that most of you have this, although I have run into a few people who don't. If you don't have My Tasks set up as a widget that automatically pops up on your desktop, let me know and we'll set it up for you. This is the best and easiest way for you to view your task lists in WebVantage and cross things off, which we, again, need you to be doing on a daily basis, every day at the end of the day, crossing off everything you've completed. Do you have it? Do you have it? Okay. I think most of you do have it. But if you don't, let me know. We'll set it up for you. I just wanted to let everyone know about a couple of things that we have come across that we know are issues we've identified that either we're working on resolving or we may not ever be able to resolve. We did find out that there's a 32,000 character limit in the creative construction instructions box in the work order. Now, most of the time we'll never get close to that, but we have, for example, there was a Coke job that hit that limit. Because we update our work orders at the top, not at the bottom, we weren't getting an error saying that we ran out of characters, and it just started deleting from the bottom, and we didn't know. So we were losing the original work order information. If you have a really long work order, just pay attention to that. Some people start adding to the component comments instead of creative instructions. A lot of the AEs who ran into this problem started keeping their work orders in a Word document on their desktop. I think that's a lot of extra work. I'm not necessarily encouraging that, but I just want you to be aware that this happens and to watch out for it. Like I said, the desktop widgets were slowing down the system, so that's why I gave one widget for account service and creative that we recommend having on your desktops and really limit it to that. We've submitted enhancement requests for so many things for WebVantage. I encourage you, if you run into other things that you think the system could do better, that we haven't already been made aware of, or any glitches that you run into, email blue@stargroup1.com like you have been. We do actually submit those to Advantage. A lot of them are supposedly being addressed in the update that's coming out at the end of this month. So they do try to fix some of these things, so certainly let us know if you run into anything. Testing the new Sapphire software update in the 4th quarter. We were supposed to test it. We weren't given enough time to test it, so now it sounds like it's just going to be rolled out, and we're going to see how it goes. We will still test it internally before we push it out to everybody, but we were actually hoping to be part of the beta test team to then give Advantage feedback before they pushed it out to the entire population. It didn't work out that way, unfortunately. And then this last bullet here is I want to start having quarterly task force meetings for project management and just like a general town hall of issues that maybe we can help solve. Working on getting a team together on that. We may actually be making it a bigger meeting than I originally thought. After talking to Tracy, it might actually be a bigger meeting than just a small task force. So we'll keep you updated on that. Okay, almost done, guys. Important reminders for AEs. These are just things that I want to touch on because, again, they're either problems that keep coming up or questions that keep coming up. Always confirm your deadlines with project management before promising to a client. Please don't tell your client that we can do something and then put in the work order and hope that it pushes through. Just check. Just always check. Don't promise anything to your client. Be sure you're supplying clear direction and specs in your work orders. If you can't understand it, Creative's not going to understand it. You need to fully understand what your client is asking you for and what you're asking the creative team for. Otherwise, they're going to come back with questions that you're not going to be able to answer, and you're going to have to go back to your client anyway, and it's just a whole process that really wastes a lot of time. So make sure you understand before that work order goes in, and make sure that work order is clear. Reread it. 2 or 3 times and make sure that all the information's in there, that it's concisely bulleted with here are the deliverables, 1, 2, 3, here's what I need you to do, here's the background. I know that I've sent you all that cheat sheet for work order do's and don'ts. Refer back to that. It's helpful. It tells you exactly what you need to have in your work order and how it should be written.
Tell me what you mean by specs. I mean, because, there are
Size.
certain things, account management's not used to speccing out a brochure, I always thought that was production.
Well, it depends. That's a good question. It depends on the type of project. If it's a print ad,
Yeah.
somebody's buying media for it. Somebody has bought the space. Somebody knows what size that ad
Okay.
needs to be.
Right.
Actually, we just had this conversation this morning. If you're asking for an ad
Mhm.
and you have the media buy, you are responsible for getting the spec sheet and attaching it to the document manager.
Okay.
Now, media is no longer the team to go to for those specs. Your production manager will be getting those specs. So if you don't have them, if you don't have the spec sheet, let your production manager know, I need spec sheets for these pubs. They will get them for you, and then you will then upload them to the document manager. Okay?
Other than a print ad.
Oh, okay. So let's say I'm sorry, yes.
That's okay.
Let's say you've been asked to do a custom invitation for New Year's or whatever.
Right.
And your client certainly isn't going to say, we want a 5x7 invitation.
Correct.
No, they want us to come up with the design. That's fine, but you need to say that in your work order. Client has left specs up to, creative team's recommendation. Budget is whatever, still needs to fit in a standard size A envelope so that we're not going crazy. We need to still provide some budget parameters.
No, I understand that. It's just that, I don't know all the A size envelopes.
And you're not expected to.
Okay.
No, but if there's
But
a budget.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that is on a project by project basis, and that was just an example.
Okay.
But if
Okay.
we know that we have a set budget and
Gotcha.
we don't have $5 per piece,
Okay.
we just want to make sure the creative team knows that we don't have the money to just go like sky's the
custom
limit,
size.
crazy.
Gotcha.
That was just a very specific example. Yes, Kevin, do you have a question?
It brings up an interesting, there's like kind of a gray area there, and it does fall into a project by project evaluation, but a lot of times what'll happen is we'll get a work order and it says, hey, we gotta get started on this project. I don't have the specs yet, but it's gotta be out tomorrow because this event, in order to get it printed, blah, blah, blah. So I guess establishing that situation of, it's not a complete, we use work orders a lot as placeholders. Like, all right, it's in the system, we gotta get moving on it. But if we don't have the information to do it properly, like we can start concepting and stuff like that to some degree,
Right.
but also if you start concepting for something that, is a big fold out piece and then boom, we gotta,
Exactly right. And again, that'll be a case by case basis that the project manager should be flagging. So let's say it's a billboard. And typically we just start with a 14 by 48 if we don't know the exact sizes, because if we're not doing a 14 by 48, we're doing something that's generally those dimensions and we can resize. That's something that I would say if there's a hard deadline we have to meet, but for whatever crazy reason, we should have specs, but for whatever reason we don't have specs yet, and there's a hard deadline we have to meet, we don't want to be a stopgap for things that we can start on. And I think that's something that reasonably we can get started on. But yes, if it's a custom fold-out piece or some kind of crazy, I can't really think of another example, but something that would take a significant amount of time if specs changed and they could drastically change, no, we don't want to waste our time starting on that if there's a potential for a large amount of rework. So that'll be something that we'll then have to go back to the IE and say, no, we need some sort of specs before we can get started. Most of the time, most types of projects, if we don't have exact specs, there's something we can start with. Even an ad, if we know it's a full page 4 color ad, we start with an 8.5 by 11 and we resize if we have to. Don't we? AEs, listen, I'm not saying that's what we should be doing ever, 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 ever. We should always have specs. We should always be able to get the specs because there's a media plan that lives somewhere, hopefully, that should allow enough time for us to wait for specs and then design. So keep that in mind. But in very rare cases, for whatever reason, the client didn't tell us that they booked this ad on their own and it's due tomorrow. Oh
they
shit,
did.
but they can't get their shit together and send us the specs. We need to get started so we don't miss this deadline. Okay, that's a case by case basis, but that's a conversation that needs to be had with project management so we understand why we're doing this to ourselves. That kinda, I know. There's always going to be like some gray,
Just
weird
establishing
things.
What the ideal is.
Yeah. Okay. This is a big one. This is a big one that is hard to communicate just by me saying it to you guys. It's something you just need to get used to doing. If your client is giving you vague or incomplete direction, try to pull information out of them. I know it's difficult sometimes. I know. And a lot of times you're not working with people who truly understand marketing, so it's hard to pull that information out of them. And they don't always know what they want in the beginning. And that's fine, but it's your job as account executives to try to pull that information out of them, to try to figure out what it is that they're looking for. We want a new tagline or whatever. Well, why? Why do you want a new tagline? Is the old one stale? Are you getting negative feedback from consumers? Okay, fine. You want us to reposition your brand. Okay, well, what did you do? Any focus groups or surveys to back up why that's necessary? What's negative about the current one, and what direction do you want to be pushing your brand into? Or, what's the end goal? What's the objective? What's the main message that you're trying to send to your customers? And from that, we can kind of build a strategy. But if the client just comes to you and says, come up with some new taglines, that's not enough. That's not enough information. We can't get started with that. And again, that's just a very specific example, but vague direction doesn't help us get it right for them. We can start on it, sure, but it's going to be wrong because they have something in mind. They just don't know how to communicate it to you. So you have to try your best to ask the right questions to pull that information out of them. Actually, the end of this bullet, a lot of times they'll come back and the revision will be, well, we just don't like any of them. We don't like any of the concepts you sent. We need more. Okay, what didn't you like about what we sent? Specifically, what didn't you like? If they missed the mark, why? What was the mark then? Because clearly we didn't understand what it was. We need to have a conversation about why you didn't like what you got so we know where to move forward in the next round. Okay. This one has been happening a lot. Actually, I've been seeing it happen less now that we've been sending reminders. But please, please, please don't ever send any PDF to a vendor or to a publication to print without officially requesting the final high-res print-ready file via a work order. What you get from the creative team or from activation is not high-res or final until you've specifically approved and asked for that final file. So don't ever assume that you can just send off what you received. Always remember to hit save during and after writing your work orders. Unfortunately, I've seen it happen to so many people where they've written out this whole detailed work order and it comes through blank because they forgot to hit save. I know a lot of AEs said that they write their work orders in a Word document and then copy and paste them in just in case that happens. That's fine, however you want to do it. But I hate to see you have to just rewrite it from scratch. Proofread, we've been through that. Please proofread everything. It is your job. It is your job to proofread and make sure that there are not any mistakes in your work orders, in the creative that goes out to your client, in white papers, emails, anything. Please proofread everything. And own your deadlines. This is something I recommend to all AEs. Update your status reports every single day. It is the best and only way to stay on top of your deadlines and make sure stuff doesn't fall through the cracks. If you only do it once a week, you could be a week behind on a missed deadline before you realize that it's missed. Update them every day. Get into the habit of updating them every day. If you have a big looming deadline, a big project that's been in the system for 2 or 3 weeks, you haven't heard anything about it, which would be weird because you really should be checking in anyway. But let's say that big deadline is approaching. Check in with creative a few days, maybe a week before, and just say, hey, you guys are good on this. We're in a decent place. A lot of you guys schedule internal reviews so you've already, seen where the team is at, which is a good practice to get into. But this is just a reminder. Don't just let that 3-week deadline go and then on the day of say, oh shit, I never got that. But that's a big project. You want to make sure you're following it through. That's something that project management will be helping with once that team kind of gets into place. Until then, unfortunately, it still kind of falls on account service. So it's just a reminder, to stay on top of your deadlines. Okay, important reminders for creative. Please read your work orders as soon as you get them and notify project management of any scheduling issues immediately. Now, I know a lot of times you don't really know what it's going to take you until you really start working on the project. Some of those larger projects that maybe will require more time once you start your creative process, you won't know until you actually start on it, and that's fine. But typically, we want you to read them when you first get them. If the hours that you've been scheduled seem off to you, just based on what the work order is requesting, you got to let us know right away. And most of the time, we can just change it. Most of the time it's okay, and we can say, all right, yeah, we can give you an extra however many hours. Sometimes, though, we may need to go back to the AE and say, okay, we don't have this in the budget. What's the solve? But please let us know as soon as possible, because we really do use those hours we schedule to manage your daily schedule. So if we've only got 2 hours in there for a project you think is going to take you 8, we need to know that because we're scheduling other things around those hours on your calendar. So please let us know as soon as possible. And it's just a conversation. We're not going to take it personally. Just come back to us and say, hey, look, I really think because of X, Y, and Z, I need 4 hours instead of 2. And most of the time, that's not going to be a problem. Proofread for you guys too. It's everyone's responsibility to proofread. I hate seeing things go to the client with mistakes in them. And it's everyone's responsibility to look at that. 8 different people see that PDF before it goes out the door. Somebody should have caught that typo. So please, in your copy documents, creative layouts, keynote presentations, decks, anything going to the client, please proofread. And creative team, it's on you to own your deadlines as well. That's another shared responsibility. You have your task list, you get them every day. They're in WebVantage. You know when your deliverables are due. If there's an issue and you think you're not going to make it, project management needs to be notified as early in advance as possible. Not that day, not that night when the deadline's already passed that, oh, I think I need some more time. When that deadline has been agreed to, the client knows that. We have already said to the client, yes, we can make this deadline. By the time, that deadline comes, they're expecting it. So we can't that day be going back to our client and saying, oh, we need more time, sorry. So just be on top of that. Look at your task list. If you have any concern that you're not going to meet something, let us know right away, and we'll do our best to maneuver around it. Yeah, that's all said about that. I already said, please make sure you're crossing off your completed tasks at the end of the day. That's another thing that helps us know what your schedules really look like, if we really have a past due task, or if you just forgot to cross it off. Because every morning when we send out those task lists, we are monitoring everything that's past due and trying to figure out why it's past due and what we need to shift around. Hopefully that happens very rarely, because you'll have already let us know that you need more time well ahead of the due date. Forget about that last one. The daily task list email alerts that automatically go from WebVantage, that's never going to happen. So you're going to continue to get PDFs from us, unfortunately. Okay. All scheduling must go through project management. If you need to shift work off of your plate, or you think you've got too much going on, you're not going to get to something, please don't call your AE and say, oh, can I have more time on this? Okay, great, thanks. And then that's it. Project management needs to know that. You need to come to us. We will talk to the AE on your behalf, or together, as a group. But we need to be involved in that conversation because we have the global view of what else is going on in the system. And who we can shift it to and whatever. If senior management has pulled you into a project under the radar, please let project management know about that as well, so we can schedule your other work around it. If we don't know that you're working on that new business deck, we're assuming you have that time available and we're scheduling you other things. So please let us know if anything like that pops up. Please always remember to upload your copy documents and PDF layouts to the document manager. I think most of you guys are really great about doing that. It's not a problem. I have seen a couple of you just send emails directly to the AE, not copying anyone. Anything going to the AE that will be passed on to the client has to be sent as a reply to WebVantage. You all have that SOP. Please follow it. Project management needs to see those emails come through, number one, because we need to know the status of the job. But more importantly, it needs to be archived. It needs to be tracked in WebVantage. We need to be able to go back to it and grab that PDF or that copy document at a later date. And the only way to do that is if it's archived in WebVantage because you sent it as an alert. So across the board, no matter what, that needs to be happening. Also, please remember to let project management know if you have a scheduled vacation or day out of the office as soon as you're aware of the dates. We put that on your calendars. We obviously need to schedule around it if you're not going to be in the office, so we need to know about any scheduled days off. Okay, this is a big one. That's why I bolded it. Work orders and project management do not take the place of interdepartment communication. Just because it was in a work order, that doesn't mean there doesn't need to be a conversation had. That doesn't mean that there still doesn't need to be a kickoff meeting, or even just pick up the phone as the art director or the copywriter to the AE and say, hey, I just want to make sure I've got this right. This is the objective. This is the end goal. This is what the client's looking for. Also, account service and project management aren't going to be able to read the minds of the creative team. Once you dive into your project, it's very likely that you're going to run into questions that nobody would have ever thought of until you start your creative process. So just because a work order went through doesn't mean that you're not still going to have questions that then need to go back to the AE or project manager or whoever. In the work order should always be a project background, a due date, specific deliverables, and specs. Outside of that, once you get into your creative process, there may be specific creative questions that then need to be discussed. So please don't think that, that communication is going to stop happening. And then when those conversations do happen, if a change in the scope of work or deliverables happens as a result of the questions from the creative team, account service is responsible for updating that work order with whatever changes have been agreed upon by the creative team and themselves, so that it's documented that, okay, now that we've discussed, here are the new deliverables, or here's the new direction, or whatever it may be, so that that's documented and everyone knows what's going on. And a lot of times Tracy's checking everything. A lot of times Tracy needs to go into those work orders to know what was asked of us, to make sure that it was correct. And same thing with the art director. If Dimitri's working on something and John has to check it, he needs an accurate work order to check against to make sure it was done correctly. So that's important. Okay, and for now, until this project management team has been solidified, please remember to always copy myself and Becca on anything that needs project management involvement. If you feel the need to copy one of us, copy us both. That doesn't go for broadcast things because Becca is the keeper of broadcast. But anything else that one of us would be on, the other should also be on. Okay.
We did the
I'm
half
exhausted.
hour.
No, I don't think so. I don't know. What time is it?
It was an hour.
It was an hour. Wow, how did I go through the first one so much
I
quicker?
don't know. That's what I said.
Yeah, it's Betty's fault. I know. I don't know.
So
What
sorry.
happened. I think I probably, since the last one I did, have
I
gathered
asked-
more thoughts in my head that I probably added.
And she didn't answer
So any questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to bring to the table now that maybe is an issue anywhere in the system that you found that you want us to start
Let me
tackling
bring
or
you an
working on?
issue right now that I just got from a client.
Mhm.
John did the roadshow logo gradation from light to dark blue. Client just emails me and says, it's fine, but we think the gradation of light blue should go further down and in the little bubbles. So I put that in a work order alert, whatever it is, and I can send it directly to him.
No client change will ever go directly to
Okay,
the
I got
creative
it.
team.
It's a little- okay,
Yeah.
okay, that's what I thought. They
Yeah.
just went- But the only change it can be if it's a comma instead of a period or
Right,
something like that.
or
Yeah,
a
that's-
typo, a word is spelled wrong. Those
Okay.
are like really the only things, the only changes that can go
Okay.
directly to the creative team.
Got it. I already got it in it.
We kind of talked about this before, and I don't want to do anything that you're saying, but from the standpoint of, it seems kind of crazy for Betty to put together a work order to say, we're missing a period at the end of this sentence where it's a comma instead of a period.
I agree.
Does that fall into that world of, can I make
Oh,
a
an
phone call?
email? Oh, yeah,
And like
yes.
say,
Does
John,
it
Yes,
fall
that's a
into
good
what?
question.
I just noticed, can we fix this? And then it's done. And, because it's not one of those things like it got changed, it was like a screw up or
That's it.
something. Because I know
Yes,
those are not,
that's a very good question. And actually, in the case of that,
What's the question and give me
the
the
question
answer.
is, in the case of like a misspelled word or a missing
Yeah.
period, do you actually have to put in a work order? Can you just send an email or make a phone call?
Right.
Yes. In those cases, and only those cases, you can just send an email and say, hey, can you add this period at the end? The only other time you can do that is, again, if you had already requested a change in a work order and it just got overlooked. You
Yeah.
don't need to submit a new work order with the same change. Just
Okay.
reply with an email and
Right.
say, hey, you
See,
missed
I
this.
didn't know
Can you
that,
do
and
it?
I submitted a work order and gave the same direction, but it was there before, but I didn't say, it was there before to anybody.
Yeah, those are the only two cases where you can send an
Okay.
email or make a phone call. Yes.
Hey, Melissa?
Yes.
When we were talking earlier about, the internal approvals and things like that, making sure the work orders are up, so in case, like Kevin or John have to approve a piece of, creative. One of the things that we had decided on very early is that to not overwhelm the system and cause confusion, because one of the things that AEs have said continuously, that if it comes to the system, and because they're only a work group and they receive it, they believe it has internally been approved. But just so we can always reinforce the fact that if Dimitri wants to get an approval from John, that he's sharing John, is sending John a PDF or posting something where John can go take a look at it, and we're dealing with it that way instead of putting it through Webvantage and passing it through, because
Yes.
too often now we've had people say, oh, I just already passed it on to the client before John's had a chance to make comments, Kevin's had a chance. So we're getting robbed of that additional internal review step quite often.
Yes.
There's just confusion about the.
Yes.
system.
Yes. Very good question. Yes. To clarify, when you respond to that alert with the PDF, it is only after you've gotten all your internal creative approvals, being the art director and Tracy. That is a behind-the-scenes procedure that nobody needs to see except for the creative team. It happens in email. It's on the designer or the art director to get those approvals on their own. The account executive will and should always assume that if they've received it in a Webvantage alert, that it was already internally approved and that they can push it out.
Okay.
So yes, for everybody, I guess Dimitri's not on the phone, but yes, that process is behind the scenes via email. Yes.
and that kind of language can go into those alert comments. Like, hey, this is good to go, approved, everybody's looked at it, go.
It can, yeah.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, it is assumed.
Right,
So
well, and
just-
truthfully, what the agreement was, and a lot of people are good at it, and some other people are maybe not so good at it, is that once it is internally reviewed, like say the Dimitri person with John, if Dimitri says, John's approved, so we know exactly who's approved it, how far it's got along, so they know that, somebody internally has seen it, so there isn't, because we're still at that point where some people do it and some people don't do it. So there's continuously, mistakes being made where there's work getting out. We had it all on a Walker Newman letterhead, business card thing a while back that we didn't internally get the review and it went to the client and the client, picked a version we would have never let get out of the agency to begin with. So we had them unsell ourselves.
Okay, and you see that happening on a per person basis
No,
because that.
I wouldn't say I would say it's throughout the month it happens maybe 2-3 times. So I mean it's still not I'd like to get 100% of that because really what it does is again it allows us to have dialogue about the work because I don't feel like still we're doing enough of that. Like we do a lot of pass through and yay whatever, but it forces that dialogue to happen about what we're
Yep.
I'd say on a rare occasion it gets out.
Okay.
And I'd say certain people continuously, like, there's certain AEs that because they're fast to act, and as soon as they get their hands, it's being pushed out, and those are the places where we tend to run into this problem, so.
Yeah, well, and like I said, because that is the process, if the AE gets it, they assume that it's been
That's
approved.
what I
So
was saying. That's
it's
exactly
really
right.
on the designer and the art director, whoever is working on that project, to get those approvals before it gets sent through WebVantage. So that's kind of a behind the scenes
Yep, I agree.
process that we just need to make sure that we're following.
Reinforcing.
Mhm.
So we stay on top of it.
Yeah.
Because I think we're good for a while, and then we slough off, and,
Mhm.
we get lost on it. And then that, I think it's just reinforcing across the board there, basically, that's how it works.
Mhm. Yep. Anything else?
Well, one of my biggest issues is scheduling,
Mhm.
because in the most recent days, weeks, months, and years, I get jobs on my schedule, and then like I come to the day before it's due, and I guess it's partly my fault, but at the same token, like the account service department's like, well, it's been on your calendar since 11/11, and I don't know why you haven't touched it. Where like a lot of times we get work scheduled, and I don't really touch it till the day before because of certain.
But have you opened the work order and read the work order? Because you should be doing that as soon as it comes through, or that
I
day.
think what he's
I
saying
try
is,
to, but in the perfect world, I'd love to stop what I'm doing and look at everything. But when I'm deep into like doing stuff, I don't stop and do it.
But
Well, I
then,
think what he's saying, and this is where we go back to this conversation about traffic all the time.
Mhm.
And I don't know who's grown up in the traditional traffic world, but traffic would, check in with you at the end of the day, find out what you were able to, get off your plate, what was still left on your plate. So while they're asking those questions, they're deducing the things that he hasn't been able to get to are still on there, and keeping an eye on that, the forward progress of that, saying, am I giving them enough time?
Mhm.
So at some point in that process, it triggers a system where they say, okay, now we're down to 3 days, it's not enough, because I've allotted you 15 hours, and obviously that's not gonna be enough to be able to get that job completed. And then it forces it to go back in and say, hey guys, because of other work, we've had to push this, you're probably not gonna get it till a day later and making those accommodations.
Right.
I think what John is reacting to is the fact that because we're missing that check-in and the continuing, sort of observation of deadlines,
Mhm.
is that it's putting that pressure on him when he already has a lot of other things on his plate, and this has been an internal struggle here, because again, he goes about the traditional traffic process. But who is responsible